Heavenly Father, I pray for everyone watching this video right now. May you bless them with peace, joy, and breakthroughs in their lives. Amen. Hello, my wonderful family. I am so glad and grateful to have you here with me today. Your support means the world, and I truly don't take it for granted. Before we dive into today's powerful story, please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, drop a comment below to share your thoughts, and of course, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update from this channel. This wedding is over, and you need to leave. Now, Isabel Hartwell stared at her twin sister Victoria in disbelief, still wearing the wedding dress she'd saved for 2 years to afford. Around them, 300 wedding guests fell silent, their champagne glasses frozen halfway to their lips as Victoria's words echoed through the garden reception. "Victoria, what are you talking about?" Isabel's voice shook with confusion and growing humiliation. "This is my wedding." "Not anymore." Victoria's smile was sharp enough to cut glass as she gestured to the security guards flanking her. "Gabriel isn't coming back. He left you at the altar, remember? And frankly, this whole pathetic display is embarrassing our family." Isabel felt the world tilting beneath her feet. Gabriel had stepped away during the ceremony, whispering something about an urgent phone call that couldn't wait. That was 45 minutes ago. She'd assumed he'd return any moment, had been making excuses to their guests while her heart hammered with increasing panic. He said he'd be right back. There was an emergency. There was no emergency, Isabel. There was reality. Victoria's voice carried across the garden with calculated cruelty. He realized what everyone else here already knows, that you're not the kind of woman a man like Gabriel Cross actually marries. The guests began murmuring, some pulling out phones to record what was clearly becoming a social media catastrophe. Isabel caught sight of her reflection in the fountain's surface, desperate, abandoned, humiliated in front of everyone who mattered in their small town. "I don't understand." The words came out as a whisper, but in the awful silence, everyone heard them. Victoria stepped closer, her voice dropping to a stage whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the garden. "I understand you're confused. You've always had trouble reading situations correctly. But Gabriel called me 20 minutes ago. He's not coming back, and he asked me to handle this." "Handle what?" "Getting you to leave with whatever dignity you have left." Isabel's mind raced through the morning's events, searching for signs she'd missed. Gabriel had seemed nervous during the ceremony, checking his phone repeatedly. When it rang during the vows, his face had gone pale. But he'd kissed her hand and promised he'd return before stepping away. "Where is he?" Isabel demanded, finding her voice. "Does it matter?" Victoria shrugged with practiced indifference. "He's gone, Isabel. And frankly, I think we all saw this coming." Mrs. Patterson from the flower shop stepped forward, her face kind but concerned. "Isabel, dear, maybe you should." "Should what?" Isabel spun toward the crowd, seeing pity in every face. "Should accept that my husband abandoned me? Should believe that everything Gabriel told me about loving me was a lie." Victoria's laugh was musical and cold. "Oh, sweetie. Of course it was a lie. Look around you." She gestured at the modest garden venue, the simple decorations, the budget-friendly catering. "Do you really think a man like Gabriel Cross, who drives a Mercedes, who's traveled all over the world, who could have anyone, would choose this? Would choose you?" The words hit Isabel like physical blows. She'd always been the insecure twin, the one who'd struggled with self-doubt while Victoria excelled at everything. But Gabriel had made her feel beautiful, valuable, worthy of love. For 18 months, he'd convinced her that she was enough. "He proposed to me," Isabel said weakly. "Men propose to women they sleep with," Victoria replied with devastating casualness. "It doesn't mean they actually follow through with marriage, especially when they remember who they really are." Isabel felt tears burning her eyes, but she refused to let them fall in front of this crowd. "You're lying." "Am I? Then where is he?" The question hung in the air like a death sentence. Isabel pulled out her phone with shaking hands, calling Gabriel's number for the dozenth time. It went straight to voicemail. "Gabriel, please. I don't understand what's happening. Just please call me back. Everyone's watching, and I don't know what to tell them." She ended the call and looked up to find Victoria watching her with something that looked almost like satisfaction. "Isabel," Victoria said gently, as if speaking to a child, "I know this is hard. But Gabriel was always temporary for you. We both knew that." "We both knew what?" Victoria glanced around at the guests, ensuring she had their full attention. "That Gabriel Cross was out of your league from the beginning. I tried to warn you, but you were so caught up in the fantasy of being chosen by someone like him. Hello, friends. Welcome to a story that will shatter every assumption you have about family loyalty, hidden truths, and the devastating power of jealousy disguised as protection. I'm here with you for the next hour and a half as we discover that sometimes the people who claim to love us most are the ones capable of the deepest betrayal, and that justice has a way of arriving exactly when we least expect it. What Isabel doesn't know yet is that her twin sister's cruelty isn't random, it's calculated. And Gabriel's disappearance isn't abandonment. It's something far more complex and dangerous than anyone in this garden could imagine. Are you ready to discover what happens when love, power, and family secrets collide in the most spectacular way possible? Victoria, that's enough. Isabel's voice carried a strength that surprised even her. Whatever's happening with Gabriel, whatever's going wrong, you don't get to humiliate me in front of our entire town. I'm trying to save you from further humiliation, Victoria replied smoothly. The longer you stand here in that dress, making excuses for a man who's clearly not coming back, the worse this gets for everyone. Isabel looked around the garden, seeing her life falling apart in real time. These weren't just random guests. They were her neighbors, her co-workers, her extended family. People who would remember this moment forever. He loves me, she said quietly, but even she could hear the doubt creeping into her voice. Victoria's expression softened into something that looked like genuine sympathy, which somehow made it worse. Isabel, I love you. You're my sister. That's why I'm trying to help you understand that Gabriel was never going to. The sound of jet engines screaming overhead cut through Victoria's words like thunder. Everyone in the garden looked up as a sleek private aircraft circled low over the venue, its engines so loud that conversation became impossible. The plane banked sharply, heading toward the small airport just outside town. Isabel felt her heart hammering as she recognized something familiar about the aircraft's markings, though she couldn't place what. Victoria's face had gone completely white. That's not. What? Isabel shouted over the engine noise. But Victoria was backing away from her, bumping into guests, her confident facade cracking for the first time all afternoon. Isabel's phone buzzed with a text from Gabriel. I'm so sorry, my love. I'll explain everything in 5 minutes. Don't let anyone make you leave. I'm coming. She stared at the message, hope and confusion warring in her chest. Around her, the wedding guests were chattering excitedly about the unexpected air show, but Victoria looked like she'd seen a ghost. Isabel, Victoria said urgently, grabbing her sister's arm. We need to talk. Privately. Right now. Why? Because there are things about Gabriel you don't know. Things that change everything. Isabel pulled away from her sister's grip. What things? Victoria glanced around nervously, as if seeing the wedding guests for the first time. Things that make this wedding impossible. Things that make your relationship with him dangerous. Dangerous how? Before Victoria could answer, the distant sound of sirens began growing louder, coming from the direction of the airport. Multiple vehicles moving fast. Isabel looked at her twin sister's panicked face and realized that Victoria knew exactly who was on that plane. Who is Gabriel? Isabel whispered. Victoria's silence was answer enough. Victoria grabbed Isabel's wrist with desperate force, dragging her away from the crowd toward the edge of the garden. We need to leave. Right now. Let go of me. Isabel yanked free, but followed her sister toward the privacy of the rose arbor. Victoria, what's happening? Why do you look terrified? Because Gabriel Cross isn't who you think he is. Isabel felt ice forming in her stomach. What do you mean? Victoria's perfect composure was cracking like damaged porcelain. I mean his name isn't Gabriel Cross. I mean you've been living with someone whose real identity could get you killed. That's insane. Is it? Tell me, Isabel, what do you actually know about your fiancé's background? His family? His work? His life before he moved here 18 months ago? Isabel opened her mouth to respond, then stopped. Gabriel had always been vague about his past, deflecting questions with charm and gentle subject changes. She'd assumed he was simply private, maybe carrying some old pain he wasn't ready to share. He works in consulting, she said weakly. Consulting for whom? What kind of consulting? What company? He travels a lot for work. International clients. Victoria's laugh was sharp with panic. International clients. Oh, Isabel. You sweet, naive girl. The sirens were getting closer now, and Isabel could see black SUVs racing down the country road toward their venue. Her mouth went dry as she counted at least 6 vehicles in the convoy. Victoria, you're scaring me. Good. You should be scared. Victoria glanced toward the approaching vehicles, her face pale with something that looked like genuine terror. Isabel, I tried to protect you from this. I tried to warn you that Gabriel was wrong for you, but you wouldn't listen. Protect me from what? From falling in love with someone whose real life would destroy yours. Isabel thought back through 18 months of memories, searching for red flags she'd missed. Gabriel's reluctance to meet her friends initially. His strange hours, the mysterious phone calls he took in private. The way he sometimes seemed to know things about local politics and business that didn't match his supposed consulting background. What's his real name? Victoria hesitated, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. Gabriel Sinclair. The name hit Isabel like a physical blow. Even in their small town, everyone knew the Sinclair family name. Old money, political connections, the kind of wealth and influence that shaped elections and moved markets. That's impossible. The Sinclairs are powerful, connected, dangerous to people like us. Victoria's voice was urgent now. Isabel, Gabriel Sinclair isn't just wealthy. He's being investigated by federal agencies for things I can't even begin to explain to you. Isabel felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. You're lying. I wish I was. But 3 weeks ago, FBI agents came to my office asking questions about you. About your relationship with Gabriel. About whether you knew who he really was. The revelation hit Isabel like a truck. FBI agents came to see you? They wanted to know if you were involved in whatever Gabriel is involved in. They wanted to know if you were helping him, or if you were just an unknowing cover for his activities. Isabel sank onto the stone bench beside the rose arbor, her wedding dress pooling around her like spilled cream. What did you tell them? I told them the truth. That you're an innocent teacher who has no idea she's been dating someone under federal investigation. Victoria sat beside her, and for the first time, her voice carried genuine emotion. Isabel, I've been trying to protect you for 3 weeks. Trying to find a way to get you away from Gabriel before this all exploded. By humiliating me at my own wedding? By saving you from something worse than humiliation. Victoria grabbed her hands. Isabel, do you know what happens to innocent people who get caught up in federal investigations? Do you know how your life would change if you became a person of interest in whatever Gabriel is involved in? Isabel thought about her quiet life teaching 3rd grade, her small apartment, her simple dreams of marriage and family. The idea of federal investigations and dangerous secrets seemed impossible to reconcile with the man who'd made her coffee every morning and listened to her stories about her students. He loves me, she whispered. Maybe he does. But love doesn't change the fact that being with him puts you in danger. The convoy of black SUVs was pulling into the venue's parking area now, and Isabel could see uniformed agents emerging from the vehicles. Wedding guests were pulling out phones, recording everything as the situation spiraled beyond anyone's control. Victoria, if you knew this 3 weeks ago, why didn't you tell me then? Victoria's hesitation lasted a moment too long. I was trying to find the right way. The right way to what? To convince you to leave him without destroying your heart in the process. Something in Victoria's tone didn't ring true, and Isabel studied her sister's face with growing suspicion. Victoria had always been the competitive twin, the one who couldn't bear to see Isabel succeed at anything. Even as children, Victoria had found ways to undermine Isabel's achievements, her friendships, her moments of happiness. Victoria, Isabel said slowly, how exactly did the FBI know to contact you about Gabriel? What do you mean? I mean, why would federal agents approach you instead of me? Why would they assume you'd know more about my relationship than I would? Victoria's face went carefully blank. They probably contacted several people in town, gathering information. Did they contact Mom? Dad? My principal at school? Any of my other friends? Victoria's silence was damning. They only contacted you, didn't they? Isabel's voice was growing stronger. Which means someone told them that you were the person to talk to about Gabriel and me. Isabel, I don't think this is the time. Someone told them that you had information about Gabriel that I didn't have. Understanding was dawning like a cold sunrise. Victoria, what did you do? I protected you. How? Victoria stood abruptly, pacing away from the bench. Isabel, you don't understand how dangerous this situation is. Then explain it to me. Tell me exactly how you've been protecting me. The sound of helicopters was joining the sirens now, and Isabel could see news crews setting up equipment outside the venue's gates. Whatever was happening, it was big enough to attract major media attention. Victoria, answer me. What did you do? Her sister turned back to face her, and for the first time in their lives, Isabel saw real fear in Victoria's eyes. Not the calculated drama Victoria often used to manipulate situations, but genuine terror. "I made a deal," Victoria whispered. "What kind of deal?" "The kind that was supposed to keep you safe." Isabel stood slowly, her wedding dress rustling in the sudden stillness. Around them, the garden party was dissolving into chaos as federal agents began interviewing guests, but in their small bubble by the roses, everything felt suspended. "Victoria, what kind of deal did you make?" "I told them I could deliver Gabriel." The words hung between them like a death sentence. Isabel felt her world reshaping itself around this new, impossible truth. "You set him up. I saved you from being arrested as an accessory to whatever crimes he's committed. You betrayed the man I love. I protected my sister from destroying her life over someone who was using her." Isabel stared at Victoria, seeing her clearly for the first time in 25 years. Not the successful twin, not the protective sister, but a woman whose jealousy had driven her to collaborate with federal agents against her own family. "How long have you been working with them?" "Since the day Gabriel proposed to you." The timeline hit Isabel like a physical blow. 6 months of planning this wedding while Victoria secretly worked to destroy it. 6 months of sharing her happiness with someone who was systematically undermining it. "You've been lying to me for 6 months. I've been saving you for 6 months. From what? From being happy? From being loved by someone who chose me instead of you." Victoria's mask finally slipped completely. From being destroyed by someone who never should have looked at you twice. The truth was raw and ugly between them now. Victoria's protection had been poisoned by the same jealousy that had defined their relationship since childhood. She couldn't bear to see Isabel chosen, loved, celebrated. "You couldn't stand that Gabriel picked me," Isabel said quietly. "I couldn't stand watching you throw your life away on someone who was going to destroy you." "No, Victoria. You couldn't stand watching me win for once." Before Victoria could respond, Isabel's phone rang. Gabriel's name appeared on the screen, and she answered immediately. "Gabriel? Isabel, my love, I need you to listen very carefully." His voice was tense but controlled. "There are federal agents at your wedding, and they're going to try to arrest me. But more importantly, they're going to try to use you to get to me." "Gabriel," Victoria says. "I know what Victoria says. And I know what Victoria's done." Gabriel's voice carried a pain that cut through Isabel's confusion. "She's been working with them for months, feeding them information about us, about our relationship." Isabel looked at Victoria, who had gone white as bone. "Is it true?" Isabel asked her sister. "Have you been spying on us?" Victoria's silence was confirmation enough. "Isabel," Gabriel continued, "I need you to understand something. Everything Victoria has told you about me being dangerous, about being under investigation, it's backwards." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm not the criminal they're investigating. I'm the federal agent leading the investigation." The world tilted sideways as Gabriel's words sank in. "You're FBI?" "I'm the deputy director of a joint task force investigating corruption in local government. And your sister has been feeding information to the very people we're trying to arrest." Isabel looked at Victoria, whose face had drained of all color. "That's impossible," Victoria whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. "Isabel," Gabriel's voice was urgent now, "the people your sister thinks are federal agents aren't federal agents. They're the criminals we've been investigating, and she's been helping them track my movements for months." "Victoria," Isabel said slowly, "who exactly did you think you were working with?" Victoria's hands were shaking now. "They showed me badges. Official identification. They said they were FBI. What did they look like? Professional. Serious. They knew things about Gabriel, about his background." "Victoria," Gabriel's voice carried through the phone with deadly urgency, "what names did they give you?" Victoria fumbled for her phone, scrolling through contacts. "Agent Morrison. Agent Walsh." "Isabel, get away from your sister right now." "What?" "Morrison and Walsh are the crime bosses we've been investigating for 2 years. Your sister has been working for the people who want me dead." Isabel looked at Victoria, seeing the realization dawning on her face like a horror movie in slow motion. "Oh God," Victoria whispered. "Oh God, what have I done?" The sound of jet engines was returning, growing closer, and Isabel could see the private aircraft beginning its descent toward the small airport. "Gabriel, are you coming back?" "I'm coming back with backup, and I'm coming back to marry you." His voice was fierce with determination. "But Isabel, we need to get you somewhere safe." The people your sister has been working with are going to realize they've been discovered, and they're going to get desperate. Isabel looked around the garden, seeing federal agents she now understood might not be federal agents, guests who might be in danger, and a sister whose jealousy had accidentally collaborated with organized crime. Gabriel, how long have you known about Victoria? Since our second date. But I thought she was just being an overprotective sister. And now I know she's been an unwitting accomplice to people who would kill us both without hesitation. Victoria sank onto the bench, her face in her hands. Isabel, I thought I was saving you. I thought I was protecting you from a dangerous man. Instead, you endangered both of us by trusting dangerous men. The irony was devastating and complete. Victoria's jealousy, disguised as protection, had put them both in mortal danger while trying to destroy Isabel's happiness. What happens now? Isabel asked. Gabriel's voice was grim. Now we find out if love is stronger than the mess jealousy has created. The fake federal agents weren't bothering with subtlety anymore. Isabel watched through the rose arbor as the men in black suits began herding wedding guests toward the parking area, their movements too aggressive for legitimate law enforcement. One of them was speaking rapidly into his earpiece, while scanning the crowd with predatory intensity. They're looking for us, Victoria whispered, her voice hollow with growing terror. No, Isabel corrected, understanding flooding through her. They're looking for Gabriel. And when they don't find him, they're going to use everyone here as leverage to make him come back. Victoria's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and went completely white. They want to know where you are. Morrison is asking if I can get you to come to them voluntarily. What did you tell them about today? About the wedding. Everything. The venue, the timing, the guest list. Victoria's voice cracked. Isabel, I gave them a complete blueprint for how to trap Gabriel. Isabel felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like lead. 300 innocent people were now in danger because her sister's jealousy had made her the perfect tool for criminals masquerading as federal agents. Gabriel, she said into the phone. How far away are you? 3 minutes. But Isabel, I need you to understand something before I get there. What? Morrison and Walsh aren't just crime bosses. They're part of a network that's been using local government corruption to launder money and traffic drugs through small towns like yours. Gabriel's voice was tight with urgency. I've been undercover for 18 months building a case against them. Undercover how? By pretending to be Gabriel Cross, a mid-level consultant with no law enforcement background. Someone they wouldn't see as a threat. Isabel's mind raced through 18 months of memories, recontextualizing every moment. Gabriel's mysterious work trips, his knowledge about local politics, his reluctance to discuss his background. He hadn't been hiding a criminal past. He'd been protecting an investigation that could save their entire community. The whole time we've been together, you've been working? The first month was work. Everything after that was real. Gabriel's voice softened despite the danger. Isabel, I fell in love with you so completely that I nearly compromised the entire investigation. I kept finding excuses to stay in town, to extend my assignment, because I couldn't bear the thought of leaving you. Victoria looked up from her phone, panic written across her face. They're coming this way. Morrison just texted that they need to speak with you immediately. Isabel could see 2 men in dark suits walking purposefully toward the rose arbor, their movements coordinated and threatening. These weren't investigators, they were hunters. Gabriel, they're here. Listen to me very carefully. Do not go with them under any circumstances. Do not let them separate you from other people. And whatever happens, trust that I'm coming for you. The line went dead just as Agent Morrison, if that was even his real name, reached the arbor. Up close, he looked less like federal law enforcement and more like expensive muscle. His suit was too nice, his smile too practiced, his eyes too cold. Ms. Hartwell, he said pleasantly, I'm Agent Morrison. We spoke on the phone about your fiancé. You spoke with my sister, Isabel corrected, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. Of course. And Victoria has been very helpful in our investigation. Morrison's smile didn't reach his eyes as he looked between the twins. Unfortunately, we have some urgent questions that can't wait. What kind of questions? The kind that require privacy. Morrison gestured toward the parking area where his colleagues were corralling guests. We have a secure location where we can talk freely. Isabel understood with crystal clarity that leaving the public would be a death sentence. I'm comfortable talking here. I'm afraid that's not an option. Morrison's pleasant tone didn't change, but his hand moved slightly toward his jacket. Ms. Hartwell, your cooperation isn't optional. Victoria stood abruptly, positioning herself between Morrison and Isabel. She's answered all your questions through me. She doesn't know anything about Gabriel's real activities. That's for us to determine. Morrison's partner, a thick-set man with dead eyes, moved to flank them. Ladies, we really do need to insist. Insist on what? Isabel asked, buying time. That you come with us for a more thorough debriefing. Isabel looked around the garden, seeing the other fake agents systematically isolating groups of guests. Mrs. Patterson from the flower shop was arguing with one of them, her face flushed with indignation. The mayor's wife was demanding to see official paperwork. Normal people responding normally to abnormal aggression. What happens to our wedding guests? Isabel asked. They'll be questioned and released once we've secured the primary subject. Gabriel isn't here. Morrison's smile turned predatory. No, but he will be. Your fiancé has a weakness for dramatic gestures, and he won't be able to resist coming back for his bride. Victoria stepped closer to Morrison, her voice desperate. You said if I helped you track Gabriel, my sister would be safe. You promised she wouldn't be involved. Plans change, Morrison replied casually. Your sister has become a valuable asset. An asset for what? For ensuring Gabriel Sinclair surrenders himself peacefully. The way Morrison said Gabriel's real name made Isabel's blood run cold. These men knew exactly who Gabriel was, which meant they'd been hunting him specifically, not investigating random criminal activity. You're not federal agents, Isabel said. Morrison laughed, the sound empty and dangerous. Very good, Miss Hartwell. You're quicker than your sister. Victoria spun toward him, understanding dawning. You lied to me. Everything you told me about Gabriel being dangerous was true from our perspective. Gabriel Sinclair is extremely dangerous to our business operations. Morrison's mask was completely off now, and your jealousy of your sister made you the perfect tool for tracking him. My jealousy? Did you really think we randomly chose you to contact? We've been watching your family for months. We knew you resented your sister's happiness, and we knew you'd be willing to believe the worst about any man who chose her over you. Victoria's face crumpled as the full scope of her manipulation became clear. You used me. You used yourself. We just provided the opportunity. The sound of approaching helicopters was growing louder now, and Isabel could see the private jet circling back toward the airport. Whatever Gabriel had planned, it was about to happen. Morrison pulled out his phone, speaking quickly. Target is still at the venue. Initiate Phase 2. What's Phase 2? Isabel demanded. Insurance that Gabriel won't try anything heroic. Morrison nodded to his partner, who began speaking into his own radio. Within seconds, Isabel watched in horror as the fake agents throughout the garden began moving guests toward a central staging area, their weapons now visible. What had looked like questioning was revealed as hostage-taking. You're taking 300 people hostage, Isabel whispered. We're ensuring a clean resolution to a complicated situation, Morrison corrected. Gabriel Sinclair has information we need, and he's proven remarkably resistant to traditional negotiation tactics. What information? The location of evidence that could destroy a very profitable network of business relationships. Victoria grabbed Morrison's arm. You said this was about drugs. About organized crime. You never said anything about taking hostages. You never asked the right questions. Morrison shook her off easily. Ms. Victoria, your usefulness has expired. Step away from your sister. No. The word came out of Victoria's mouth with surprising strength. For all her flaws, for all her jealousy and manipulation, she was still Isabel's twin sister. Excuse me? I said no. I won't let you hurt her. Morrison's expression didn't change, but his hand moved to his weapon. Ms. Victoria, you're not in a position to make demands. Maybe not, but I'm in a position to fix what I broke. Victoria pulled out her phone and began typing rapidly. Morrison lunged for it, but Victoria tossed the device to Isabel, who caught it instinctively. Send that message, Victoria said urgently, to the number labeled Real FBI. I figured out who they were 3 days ago. Isabel looked at the phone screen and saw a draft message. Emergency at Riverside Garden wedding venue. Hostage situation. Send immediate backup. Morrison and Walsh are here with weapons. You contacted real federal agents? I realized I'd made a mistake when they started asking me to provide detailed layouts of the venue and guest lists. Victoria's voice was steady now, determined. Real FBI agents don't need civilian help to arrest one person. Morrison drew his weapon. Give me that phone. No, Isabel said, hitting send on the message. The response came back immediately. Backup en route. Keep hostages away from parking area. Gabriel's team is in position. Isabel looked up at Morrison, whose face had gone dangerous. Gabriel's team? You think he's been working alone for 18 months? Morrison's laugh was bitter. Your boyfriend has half the federal government backing his investigation. The sound of helicopters was directly overhead now, military precision evident in their formation. Through the garden's entrance, Isabel could see more black SUVs arriving, but these moved with different energy, coordinated authority rather than criminal desperation. Ladies, Morrison said, his weapon now clearly visible, it appears we're going to have company. Victoria stepped in front of Isabel again, her body shielding her sister. You used my jealousy to hurt innocent people. But jealousy works both ways. What do you mean? I mean, I've spent the last 3 days documenting every conversation we've had, every instruction you've given me, every detail about your operation. Victoria's smile was sharp. Did you really think I'd trust people who told me my sister was in danger? Morrison's face went white with rage. You recorded our conversations? Every single one. And I sent copies to Gabriel Sinclair 3 days ago. The admission hung in the air like a bomb. Victoria had been playing a longer game than anyone realized, including Isabel. You've been protecting me, Isabel whispered. I've been trying to fix the mess my jealousy created. Victoria's voice was strong now. And I've been buying time for Gabriel to coordinate a response. Morrison raised his weapon toward Victoria, but before he could act, the sound of jet engines roared overhead as Gabriel's plane made its final approach. Isabel, Victoria said without taking her eyes off Morrison. Your husband is coming home. He's not my husband yet. Yes, he is. You married him 18 months ago when you chose to trust him completely. Victoria's smile was radiant and heartbroken at the same time. Today was just the ceremony. The private jet touched down at the airport as federal helicopters landed in the wedding venue's parking area, disgorging real agents who moved with military precision toward the confused crowd of wedding guests. And Isabel finally understood that her quiet life as a small-town teacher was over forever, because the man she'd fallen in love with wasn't just Gabriel Cross or Gabriel Sinclair. He was someone whose real work required the President of the United States as backup. The first helicopter to land wasn't carrying FBI agents. Isabel watched in growing confusion as men in military uniforms emerged from the aircraft, moving with precision that made the fake federal agents look like amateurs. These weren't local law enforcement or even standard federal backup. They were special operations, the kind of soldiers who appeared when situations had escalated beyond civilian capabilities. What the hell? Morrison muttered, his weapon still trained on Victoria but his confidence clearly shaken. Through the garden's entrance, Isabel could see more military vehicles arriving alongside the FBI units. Whatever Gabriel had called in for backup, it was massive, coordinated, and suggested that his investigation involved far more than local corruption. Victoria grabbed Isabel's hand. We need to get to the main group of guests. Safety in numbers. They began moving toward the crowd, but Morrison blocked their path. You're not going anywhere. Either of you. The venue is surrounded, Isabel pointed out. Your plan failed. My plan is just beginning. Morrison spoke into his earpiece. Execute Phase 3. All units, move to secondary positions. Isabel felt ice in her veins as she watched the fake agents throughout the garden shift their positions, no longer pretending to question guests, but openly herding them toward the center of the venue. What had looked like a rescue operation was becoming a siege. You're turning this into a standoff, Victoria whispered. I'm creating leverage. Morrison's smile was cold. Gabriel Sinclair might be willing to sacrifice himself, but let's see how he feels about sacrificing 300 innocent people. Before either woman could respond, a new voice cut through the chaos with absolute authority. Morrison, stand down. You're surrounded and outgunned. Isabel spun toward the voice and felt her heart stop. Gabriel was walking across the garden toward them, but he wasn't alone. Flanking him were 6 men in tactical gear, and behind them, moving with unmistakable presidential detail precision, was a figure that made Isabel's knees weak. President William Carter stepped into view, his expression grim but determined. Gabriel? Isabel's voice was barely a whisper. Hello, my love. Gabriel's eyes never left Morrison, but his voice carried all the warmth and tenderness she remembered. I'm sorry I'm late. Gabriel Sinclair, Morrison said, raising his weapon. Finally ready to face the consequences of your investigation? Actually, Gabriel replied calmly. I'm ready to introduce you to the people you've really been fighting. President Carter stepped forward, and Isabel noticed that his security detail had positioned themselves with military precision throughout the garden. This wasn't just backup. This was a full-scale federal operation. Mr. Morrison, the president said conversationally, you've been operating under some fundamental misunderstandings about who you're dealing with. Morrison's face had gone white, but his weapon remained steady. This is about local corruption. Drug money laundering through small-town government. You have no jurisdiction here. I have jurisdiction everywhere in the United States, Carter replied mildly. But you're right that this started as an investigation into local corruption. What you don't understand is how that investigation expanded. Gabriel took a step closer to Isabel, his presence both comforting and terrifying in its implications. Morrison, tell me something. Who do you think has been funding your operation? Who do you think has been providing the political protection that's allowed you to operate freely for 2 years? I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do. I think you know exactly which senators have been taking your money, which judges have been ruling in your favor, which federal officials have been ensuring your investigations disappear. Morrison's confidence was cracking, and Isabel could see panic growing in his eyes. That's not. We operate independently. No, you don't. President Carter's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. You operate as part of a network that extends from small towns like this all the way to Washington, D.C. A network that my administration has been investigating for 3 years. Isabel felt the world tilting around her as the scope of Gabriel's real work became clear. This wasn't just about local crime, it was about national security. Gabriel, she said quietly, who are you really? Gabriel looked at her with infinite tenderness and regret. I'm the person who fell in love with you while trying to save our democracy. Before she could process what that meant, Morrison made his move. Instead of surrendering, he spoke rapidly into his earpiece. All units, execute contingency plan. Take the hostages to secondary location. The garden erupted into chaos as Morrison's men began aggressively moving wedding guests toward waiting vehicles. Elderly relatives, children, neighbors, all being herded like cattle toward an uncertain fate. Stop! Gabriel shouted, but Morrison pressed his weapon against Victoria's temple. Stand down, Sinclair, or I start executing hostages. President Carter raised his hand, and the tactical teams around the garden froze. Mr. Morrison, you're making this situation infinitely worse for yourself. I'm ensuring my survival. Morrison's voice was desperate now, all pretense of control gone. Gabriel Sinclair has been destroying 2 years of careful work, and I won't let him walk away from this. Isabel watched her wedding guests being loaded into vehicles, seeing the terror on faces she'd known her entire life. Mrs. Patterson was crying as agents forced her into a van. The mayor's family was being separated, children pulled away from their parents. Let them go, Isabel said, stepping toward Morrison. I'll come with you voluntarily if you release everyone else. Isabel, no. Gabriel's voice carried absolute command. They're innocent people. So are you. Morrison laughed bitterly. Innocent? Ms. Hartwell, you've been sleeping with a federal agent for 18 months. You think that makes you innocent? I didn't know what Gabriel really did. But you're going to find out. Morrison's grip on Victoria tightened. Because Gabriel Sinclair isn't just a federal agent. Tell her, Gabriel. Tell your bride who she's really been planning to marry. Gabriel's hesitation lasted only a moment, but it was enough to confirm that there were still secrets being kept. Gabriel? Isabel's voice was small. Isabel, my feelings for you have never been part of any mission or cover story. Everything between us has been real. But, President Carter stepped forward again. Ms. Hartwell, Gabriel Sinclair is my son. The words hit Isabel like a physical blow. She looked between Gabriel and the president, seeing resemblances she'd never noticed before, understanding why Gabriel's investigation had access to military support and presidential authority. Your son, my son, who volunteered for the most dangerous undercover assignment in recent history because he believed that democracy was worth risking his life to protect. Carter's voice was filled with pride and fear. My son, who stayed in this assignment longer than planned because he fell in love with a small-town teacher who reminded him what he was fighting to preserve. Isabel felt tears streaming down her face as 18 months of memories recontextualized themselves again. Gabriel wasn't just a federal agent. He was the president's son, working undercover to expose corruption that reached the highest levels of government. You've been lying to me about everything, she whispered. I've been protecting you from a truth that could have gotten you killed, Gabriel replied. Isabel, if Morrison's network had known you were involved with the president's son, they would have eliminated you immediately. Morrison's laugh was sharp with desperate triumph. They still will. Do you think this ends here? Do you think arresting me stops the network? Actually, Victoria said quietly, it does. Everyone turned to look at her, still held at gunpoint, but somehow radiating calm confidence. Victoria, don't, Morrison began. Gabriel, check your phone, Victoria continued. I sent you something an hour ago. Gabriel pulled out his device, his expression changing as he read. Morrison, how long did you think we'd been monitoring your communications? What are you talking about? President Carter was also checking his phone, and his expression grew grimmer. Mr. Morrison, in the last hour, federal agents have arrested 47 members of your network across 12 states. Your entire operation has been dismantled. Morrison's face went white with shock. That's impossible. It's inevitable, Gabriel said. Victoria's recordings didn't just document your local activities. They provided evidence of your communications with the entire national network. Isabel looked at her sister with new understanding. You've been working with Gabriel longer than 3 days. Victoria's smile was sad but proud. I've been working with Gabriel since the day I realized I'd been manipulated into betraying my sister. I couldn't undo my mistake, but I could make sure it led to something good. How long? 6 weeks. Since the moment I understood that my jealousy had made me a tool for people who wanted to destroy everything our family believes in. Morrison's desperation was palpable now, his weapon shaking as he processed the scope of his defeat. You think this is over? You think arresting a few dozen people stops what we've built? We think it's a good start, President Carter replied. But you're right that it's not over. Which is why you're going to help us identify the remaining network members. I'll never. You will, Gabriel said calmly. Because the alternative is life in prison for terrorism, conspiracy, and treason. Or you can cooperate and receive protection in federal custody. Isabel watched the standoff, understanding that her quiet life was ending forever. Even if they survived this, even if they managed to marry and build a life together, Gabriel's real work would always involve this level of danger and complexity. Gabriel, she said quietly, if we get through this, what happens next? Gabriel looked at her with infinite love and honesty. That depends on whether you can forgive me for lying to you about who I am. Can you forgive me for not being strong enough to handle the truth from the beginning? Isabel, you've been strong enough to handle everything that's happened today. You've been strong enough to see through deception, protect innocent people, and choose love over fear. Gabriel's voice was fierce with conviction. You're stronger than you know. Morrison's radio crackled with panicked voices as his network realized they were being arrested simultaneously across the country. His empire was crumbling in real time, and everyone could hear it happening. Last chance, Morrison, President Carter said. Surrender now, and your cooperation will be noted. Continue this standoff, and you'll face federal charges that will ensure you never see freedom again. Morrison looked around the garden, seeing tactical teams in position, realizing his hostages were being systematically rescued by coordinated federal operations. His 2-year operation was ending in complete defeat. But instead of surrendering, Morrison made one final, desperate gamble. He released Victoria and pointed his weapon directly at Isabel. If I can't have Gabriel Sinclair, Morrison said with deadly calm, then Gabriel Sinclair can't have happiness. The garden went completely silent as Morrison's finger tightened on the trigger. And Isabel finally understood that loving the president's son meant accepting that some people would be willing to kill her simply for being loved. Gabriel threw himself in front of Isabel just as Morrison pulled the trigger. The gunshot echoed through the garden like thunder, and for a moment that stretched into eternity, Isabel watched Gabriel's body jerk with the impact. Blood bloomed across his white dress shirt as he collapsed against her, his weight taking them both to the ground. Gabriel! Isabel's scream tore through the air as she caught him, feeling his blood soaking through her wedding dress. Around them, chaos erupted as tactical teams swarmed Morrison, but Isabel could only focus on Gabriel's face, pale and strained as he struggled to stay conscious. I'm okay, he whispered, though blood was seeping between his fingers where he pressed against his shoulder. Isabel, I'm okay. You're bleeding everywhere. It's a shoulder wound. I've had worse. Gabriel tried to sit up, wincing with pain. But Isabel, there's something I need to tell you before the medics get here. Gabriel, you need medical attention. I need you to understand why I was really assigned to watch you. The words hit Isabel like ice water. Even bleeding and in pain, Gabriel was still revealing new layers of deception. What do you mean, assigned to watch me? President Carter was suddenly beside them, pressing a field bandage against Gabriel's wound while medics approached. Son, this isn't the time. Yes, it is. Gabriel's eyes never left Isabel's face. She deserves to know the truth before this goes any further. Isabel felt the ground shifting beneath her again. What truth? Gabriel gripped her hand with desperate strength. Isabel, you weren't a random assignment. You weren't even chosen because you lived in the town where Morrison was operating. Then why? Because you're Elizabeth Morrison. The name hit Isabel like a physical blow. She stared at Gabriel, her mind refusing to process what he was saying. That's impossible. My name is Isabel Hartwell. Your birth name was Elizabeth Morrison. You're Morrison's daughter. Isabel looked across the garden where Morrison was being restrained by federal agents, then back at Gabriel's bloodied face. You're lying. 25 years ago, Morrison had a wife and infant daughter. When his wife discovered what he was involved in, she tried to run with the baby. Gabriel's voice was growing weaker, but his words were relentless. She changed their names, went into hiding, but Morrison found them. Isabel felt Victoria's hand on her shoulder as her sister knelt beside them, her face stricken. Gabriel, please, Victoria whispered. Morrison killed his wife, but the baby disappeared. Foster care, eventually adoption by the Hartwell family. Gabriel's eyes were locked on Isabel's, pleading for understanding. Isabel, you've been hidden in plain sight for 25 years. No. The word came out as a strangled whisper. No, that's not possible. President Carter was monitoring Gabriel's vital signs while coordinating with the medical team, but his expression was grim. Ms. Hartwell, I'm afraid Gabriel is telling you the truth. Isabel pulled away from Gabriel's grip, standing unsteadily. You knew this when you met me. Yes. You knew who I was from the very beginning. Yes. So everything between us, every conversation, every moment, every time you said you loved me, was part of watching Morrison's daughter. Gabriel struggled to sit up despite his injury. Isabel, it started that way, but what? But you fell in love with your surveillance target? How convenient. But I fell in love with the woman who had no idea who her father was. I fell in love with someone who was everything Morrison isn't, kind, honest, caring about other people. Isabel felt like she was drowning in revelations that kept reshaping her understanding of herself. How long have you known? That you were Elizabeth Morrison? Since before I ever came to this town. And you never thought to tell me. I thought about it every single day for 18 months. Gabriel's voice was raw with pain and desperation. But Isabel, if you'd known who your biological father was, what would you have done? I would have made my own choices about how to handle it. You would have confronted him. You would have tried to understand why he killed your mother. You would have put yourself in danger. So you decided to lie to me instead. I decided to protect you until we could arrest him safely. Isabel looked around the garden, seeing her ruined wedding, her traumatized guests, the man she loved bleeding on the ground, and her sister whose jealousy had accidentally exposed a national conspiracy. Victoria, she said quietly, did you know? Victoria's silence was damning. Victoria, did you know who I really am? I found out 3 weeks ago, Victoria whispered, when the fake FBI agents first contacted me. They told me you were Morrison's daughter to convince me that Gabriel was dangerous. And you believed them. I wanted to believe them. Victoria's voice cracked. Isabel, I've spent our entire lives being jealous of you, and when they told me you were the daughter of a criminal, part of me was relieved to finally have proof that you weren't as perfect as everyone thought. The admission was brutal in its honesty. Victoria's jealousy had been so deep that she'd been willing to believe the worst about Isabel's parentage. So you've all been lying to me. Gabriel, the president, you. Everyone has known who I really am except me. Isabel. Gabriel reached for her, but she stepped away. Don't. Just don't. She looked across the garden at Morrison, who was watching their conversation with something that might have been satisfaction despite his restraints. Is he really my father? President Carter answered when Gabriel couldn't. Biologically, yes. But Ms. Hartwell, DNA doesn't determine who you are. You've been raised by people who loved you, shaped by experiences that made you the person Gabriel fell in love with. The person Gabriel was assigned to fall in love with. The person Gabriel was assigned to watch. What he felt for you was never part of any mission. Isabel pulled off her engagement ring and held it up to the light, seeing it clearly for the first time. Even the symbol of their love was built on foundations of surveillance and deception. Gabriel, was there ever a moment when you looked at me and didn't see Morrison's daughter? Gabriel's hesitation was barely perceptible, but Isabel caught it. There was, she whispered. There was always a part of you calculating how my genetics might affect my behavior, wondering if I'd inherited his capacity for violence or manipulation. Isabel, that's exactly what you were thinking. Every time I got angry, every time I made a decision you didn't expect, part of you was analyzing whether I was becoming my father. Gabriel tried to stand, failed, and settled for reaching toward her from the ground. You're nothing like him. Nothing. Everything about you is the opposite of everything he represents. But you still wondered, didn't you? You still watched me for signs that I might be turning into him. Gabriel's silence was confirmation enough. Isabel felt something breaking inside her chest, not just heartbreak, but the complete destruction of every foundation she'd built her life on. Her identity, her family, her love, her future. All of it constructed on lies that other people had decided she wasn't strong enough to handle. Morrison, she called across the garden. The federal agents restraining him looked to President Carter, who nodded reluctantly. What? Morrison's voice carried despite the distance. Are you really my father? Morrison's smile was savage and triumphant. Hello, Elizabeth. You look just like your mother. The words hit Isabel like physical blows. Her mother, who she'd been told died in a car accident, had actually been murdered by the man who'd contributed half her DNA. Did you kill her? I eliminated a security threat. She was your wife. She was a liability who tried to steal what belonged to me. Isabel felt rage building in her chest, hot and dangerous. I belong to you? You're my blood. My heir. My insurance policy for the future. I'm nothing to you. Morrison's laugh was empty. You're everything to me. Why do you think I've been so careful not to hurt you during this operation? Why do you think my men have been instructed to take you alive? The implications hit Isabel like a truck. You planned this. All of it. I've been planning to reclaim my daughter for 25 years. Gabriel was struggling to his feet now, supported by medics but determined to reach Isabel. He's lying. Morrison, you tried to kill her 3 minutes ago. I tried to eliminate the threat she represented while she was under federal protection. Now that your operation is blown, I have different plans for Elizabeth. President Carter stepped between Morrison and Isabel. You'll never get near her again. Won't I? Morrison's confidence was terrifying. Mr. President, you've arrested 47 members of my network. Do you know how many members we actually have? The silence that followed was deafening. Over 300 across all 50 states. You've eliminated one branch of a tree, but the roots run deeper than you can imagine. Morrison's voice carried absolute certainty. And every single one of them has been instructed to find and protect Elizabeth Morrison if anything happens to me. Isabel felt the world tilting around her as the scope of her danger became clear. She wasn't just Morrison's daughter, she was his succession plan, his heir apparent to a criminal empire that spanned the entire country. Isabel, Gabriel said desperately, that's why I couldn't tell you the truth. That's why I had to keep you safe without you knowing why. And that's why our relationship was never real, Isabel replied, her voice hollow. Because you can't love someone you're sworn to protect from themselves. That's not true, isn't it? Gabriel, can you honestly tell me that there wasn't a part of you, every single day, that was watching me for signs that I might become my father? That was calculating how to respond if I started showing criminal tendencies. Gabriel's hesitation told her everything she needed to know. I thought so. Isabel began walking toward the garden's exit, away from Gabriel, away from Morrison, away from the wreckage of everything she'd believed about her life. Isabel, where are you going? Victoria called after her. To figure out who I really am when I'm not being watched, protected, or lied to by people who think they know better than I do. It's not safe, President Carter warned. Nothing about my life has ever been safe. Isabel turned back to face them all, Gabriel bleeding on the ground, Victoria stricken with guilt, Morrison grinning with satisfaction, and the President of the United States trying to coordinate the protection of a woman who'd just learned her entire existence was built on deception. And apparently, nothing about my life has ever been real either. She pulled off her wedding dress's detachable train, letting it fall to the ground like a symbol of abandoned dreams, and walked out of the garden in her simple slip dress, leaving behind the wreckage of a love story that had never been what she thought it was. Behind her, she heard Gabriel calling her name with desperate urgency, but she didn't look back. For the first time in her life, Isabel Elizabeth Morrison was going to make her own choices about her own future, without anyone else deciding what she was strong enough to handle, even if it killed her. Isabel made it exactly 4 miles before she realized she was being followed. The black sedan had been behind her since she'd left the wedding venue, maintaining a careful distance as she drove through the winding country roads in Victoria's borrowed car. Now, as she pulled into the parking lot of a small diner on the highway, she watched in her rearview mirror as 2 more vehicles appeared, boxing her in with practiced precision. Her phone had been ringing constantly, Gabriel, Victoria, even President Carter, but she'd ignored every call. She needed space to think, to process the revelation that her entire life had been built around protecting her from a truth that made her a target for hundreds of criminals across the country. Now, sitting in a parking lot 30 minutes from the only life she'd ever known, Isabel understood that space was a luxury she couldn't afford. The men emerging from the vehicles weren't the same fake federal agents from the wedding. These were different, younger, more dangerous, moving with the confidence of people who'd been hunting someone for a long time. Isabel's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Elizabeth, time to come home. Your father is waiting." She looked up to see one of the men approaching her car, his smile friendly, but his eyes cold as winter. "Ms. Morrison?" He tapped on her window. "I'm here to take you somewhere safe." Isabel started the engine, but before she could reverse, another vehicle blocked her escape route. She was trapped, just as Morrison had planned. Her phone rang again. This time it was Gabriel. "Isabel, thank God. Where are you?" "Being collected by your father-in-law's associates," she said bitterly. "What?" "Isabel, get out of there right now." "I can't. They've boxed me in." Isabel watched as more men positioned themselves around the diner's parking lot. "Gabriel, there are at least 8 of them. We're tracking your phone. Stay on the line and—" The call cut off as one of Morrison's men disabled her vehicle remotely, the engine dying with electronic finality. The friendly man knocked on her window again. "Ms. Morrison, please don't make this more difficult than necessary." Isabel had no choice but to unlock her door. As she stepped out, she was surrounded by men who looked like professionals, not thugs but soldiers. Morrison's network was far more sophisticated than anyone had realized. "Where are you taking me?" "Somewhere your father can explain the situation properly," the leader said politely. "Without interference from federal agents who've been filling your head with lies." "Lies about what?" "About who you really are. About what you're capable of becoming." They guided her toward one of the vehicles with gentle but implacable pressure. No violence, no threats, just the clear understanding that resistance was futile. As they drove deeper into rural countryside, Isabel's phone buzzed with another message, this time from Gabriel. "Isabel, I'm coming for you. Whatever they tell you, whatever they show you, remember that you choose who you become." She wanted to believe him, but Gabriel had been lying to her for 18 months. How could she trust anything he said now? "Ms. Morrison," the man beside her said conversationally, "your father wants you to know that he never wanted to hurt you. He killed my mother. He eliminated a threat to your safety. Your mother was going to expose you to federal agents who would have used you as bait to trap him." "Federal agents like Gabriel?" "Federal agents exactly like Gabriel." The man's voice was patient, almost kind. "Ms. Morrison, Agent Sinclair has been manipulating you for 18 months, studying you, documenting your behavior patterns, preparing to use you against your own blood family." Isabel stared out the window at landscape she'd never seen before, understanding that she was being taken far from any possible rescue. "What does Morrison want from me?" "He wants to give you a choice. The choice you should have had 25 years ago." "What choice?" "Whether to embrace your heritage or continue living as someone else's pawn." Meanwhile, back at the wedding venue, Gabriel was fighting both blood loss and federal protocols as he tried to coordinate Isabel's rescue. "Sir, you need medical evacuation," the lead medic insisted. "You've lost too much blood to remain operational." "I'm not leaving without her." Gabriel tried to stand, swayed, and accepted Victoria's steadying hand. "She's alone with people who've been planning to take her for decades." President Carter was coordinating with multiple agencies, but his expression was increasingly grim. "Son, they've taken her outside our immediate jurisdiction. We're tracking her phone, but Morrison's people know we're coming. Then we move faster." "Gabriel, you can barely stand." "Then I'll sit in the helicopter and direct operations from there." Gabriel's voice carried desperate determination. "Dad, she thinks I never loved her. She thinks everything between us was surveillance and lies." "Wasn't it?" Victoria's question was quiet but devastating. Gabriel turned to face Isabel's twin sister, seeing his own guilt reflected in her eyes. For the first month, yes. I was watching her, studying her, documenting whether she showed any signs of her father's criminal tendencies. And she was everything Morrison isn't. Kind where he's cruel, honest where he's manipulative, protective of vulnerable people where he exploits them. Gabriel's voice cracked. Victoria, I fell in love with her because she proved that genetics don't determine character. But you still watched her. I watched her because I couldn't bear the thought of losing her to the same violence that killed her mother. Victoria was silent for a long moment, processing Gabriel's words. You know what the worst part is? What? She loves you completely. Even now, even after learning about all the lies, she still loves you. Victoria's voice was filled with pain. I can see it in how she looked at you before she left. She's not angry because you deceived her. She's heartbroken because she thinks you never saw her as anything more than Morrison's daughter. Gabriel felt the truth of Victoria's words like a knife in his chest. She's wrong. Then prove it. How? By choosing her over your mission. By putting her happiness above federal protocols. By showing her that Gabriel Sinclair the man is stronger than Gabriel Sinclair the agent. Before Gabriel could respond, his phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Morrison himself. Tell my son-in-law that Elizabeth is safe with her real family. If he tries to rescue her, she'll learn exactly what federal protection is worth. Gabriel stared at the message, understanding that Morrison was playing a deeper game than anyone had realized. This wasn't just about reclaiming his daughter. It was about proving to Isabel that Gabriel's love was contaminated by his professional obligations. What is it? Victoria asked. Morrison's challenging me to choose between saving Isabel and preserving the investigation. What do you mean? Gabriel showed her the message, then the follow-up that had just arrived. I have evidence that will destroy your father's presidency and expose every federal agent in my network. Attempt a rescue, and I release everything. Your choice. Isabel's freedom or American democracy. Victoria read the messages, her face going pale. He's forcing you to choose between the woman you love and your duty to the country. And he's counting on me to choose duty. Will you? Gabriel looked around the garden where his wedding had become a crime scene, where federal agents were documenting evidence of a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of government. Victoria, what would Isabel want me to choose? She'd want you to save the country. Even if it meant sacrificing her happiness. Victoria's voice was certain. That's who she is, someone who puts other people's welfare ahead of her own. And that's exactly why Morrison knows I can't abandon her. Gabriel began walking toward the helicopter, his steps unsteady but determined. Where are you going? President Carter called after him. To get my wife. Son, if you do this, Morrison wins. He destroys the investigation, exposes our agents, and probably brings down my administration. Gabriel paused, turning back to face his father. Dad, if I don't do this, I lose the only thing that's ever mattered more to me than duty. Gabriel, hundreds of federal agents will be compromised. Thousands of criminals will escape justice. And one innocent woman will be destroyed by people who've been planning to use her since before she could walk. Gabriel's voice was fierce with conviction. I became a federal agent to protect innocent people. She's the most innocent person I've ever known. President Carter studied his son's face, seeing determination that went beyond professional obligation. What do you need? Backup that doesn't officially exist. A rescue mission that never happened. And medical support that can keep me conscious long enough to bring her home. Son, you're asking me to authorize an operation that could end my presidency. I'm asking you to help me save the woman I love. President Carter was quiet for a long moment, weighing the political costs against his son's happiness. Victoria, he said finally, how well do you know your sister? Better than anyone. If Isabel learns that Gabriel chose her over national security, how will she react? Victoria's smile was sad but certain. She'll never forgive him for it. And if Gabriel chooses national security over rescuing her, she'll never forgive him for that either. Gabriel felt the impossible weight of Morrison's trap settling around him. Save Isabel and betray everything he'd sworn to protect, or protect the investigation and abandon the woman he loved to her father's manipulation. Either choice would destroy any chance of happiness they might have had together. There's a third option, Victoria said quietly. What? Isabel rescues herself. Gabriel stared at Victoria, hope and terror warring in his expression. She doesn't know how dangerous these people are. No, but she knows who she doesn't want to become. Victoria's voice carried growing conviction. Gabriel, you've been protecting Isabel from the truth about herself for 18 months. Maybe it's time to trust that she's strong enough to handle it. And if she isn't, then we live with the consequences of letting her make her own choices instead of making them for her. Gabriel looked at his phone where Morrison's latest message was waiting. 1 hour, Agent Sinclair. Choose wisely. The helicopter's rotors were already spinning as Gabriel made his decision. He was going after Isabel, even if it meant destroying everything else he cared about. Because for the first time in his life, love mattered more than duty. But what Gabriel didn't know was that Isabel was already making her own impossible choice, one that would either save them both or destroy them forever. The compound Morrison had taken Isabel to wasn't what she'd expected. Instead of a criminal hideout, it looked like a corporate retreat. Elegant buildings nestled in mountain wilderness, sophisticated security systems, people in business attire moving with purposeful efficiency. This wasn't a gang's headquarters. It was the nerve center of a legitimate-looking operation. Welcome home, Elizabeth. Morrison stood waiting for her in what appeared to be a conference room, but he looked different here. Gone was the desperate criminal from the wedding venue. In his place was a man who radiated authority and confidence, someone accustomed to commanding respect rather than demanding it through violence. This isn't my home, Isabel said, though she had to admit the mountain views were breathtaking. It could be. It should be. Morrison gestured for her to sit at a polished conference table. Elizabeth, for 25 years I've been building something extraordinary. Something that will reshape how business and government interact in this country. You mean corruption? Morrison's laugh was genuinely amused. Corruption? My dear girl, what I've built is efficiency. I've eliminated the bureaucratic waste that prevents American businesses from competing globally. Despite herself, Isabel found herself listening. This wasn't the desperate criminal from Gabriel's descriptions, but someone who clearly believed in his own vision. By bribing senators and judges? By creating partnerships between private enterprise and public service that benefit everyone involved. Morrison pulled up a presentation on the room's screens. Elizabeth, do you know what this country looked like before my network began coordinating policy? The screens showed economic data, unemployment figures, business statistics. All of it suggested that Morrison's coordination had actually improved economic outcomes in the regions where he operated. I don't understand. Senators who understand business needs pass legislation that creates jobs. Judges who appreciate economic realities make rulings that encourage investment. Local officials who work with private partners deliver services more efficiently than bloated government bureaucracies ever could. Isabel stared at the data, trying to reconcile what she was seeing with everything Gabriel had told her about Morrison's criminal activities. You're telling me you're not a criminal? I'm telling you that criminality is a matter of perspective. What Gabriel Sinclair calls corruption, I call innovation. Morrison's voice carried conviction that was hard to dismiss. Elizabeth, your boyfriend has been investigating me for 2 years, trying to prove that efficient government is somehow illegal. Efficient government doesn't require murder. Morrison's expression grew sad. Your mother's death was a tragedy that haunts me every day. But Elizabeth, she was going to expose our network to federal agents who would have destroyed thousands of jobs and eliminated services that vulnerable communities depend on. Communities like the ones Gabriel's been trying to protect? Communities that my network has been supporting for decades. Morrison pulled up more data. Elizabeth, do you know who's been funding the community centers Gabriel thinks he's protecting? Isabel felt ice forming in her stomach. What do you mean? I mean, shell companies connected to my network have been providing grant money, operational support, and political protection for community service organizations across the country. Morrison's smile was knowing, including the Riverside Community Center where you first met Gabriel. The revelation hit Isabel like a physical blow. That's impossible. Gabriel Sinclair has been working to destroy the very network that's been funding his humanitarian work. Morrison's voice carried what sounded like genuine regret. He's so focused on prosecuting what he sees as corruption that he's never asked where the money comes from to help the people he claims to care about. Isabel's mind raced through 18 months of conversations with Gabriel about his work, his passion for helping vulnerable families, his pride in the services the community center provided. You're saying Gabriel's been unknowingly working for you? I'm saying Gabriel's been unknowingly working against the interests of the people he's trying to help. Morrison leaned forward. Elizabeth, If his investigation succeeds, 47 community centers lose their funding overnight. Thousands of families lose access to childcare, job training, and educational support. Gabriel wouldn't do anything that hurt innocent people. Gabriel doesn't know that his righteous crusade against corruption is actually an attack on the social safety net. Morrison's voice was patient, almost kind. He sees senators taking money from my network and assumes it's theft. He doesn't see that the money comes with requirements to support community programs. Isabel felt her understanding of the situation shifting again. If Morrison was telling the truth, then Gabriel's investigation wasn't protecting vulnerable communities. It was about to destroy them. Why are you telling me this? Because you're my daughter, and you have a choice to make. Morrison stood, moving to the windows that overlooked the mountain valley. You can continue to let Gabriel Sinclair use you as a weapon against your own family, or you can help me save the network that's been supporting the people you care about. What kind of help? Gabriel trusts you completely. He would do anything to protect you, including abandoning his investigation. Morrison turned back to face her. Elizabeth, one word from you, and Gabriel Sinclair would walk away from everything he's worked for. Isabel understood the trap now. Morrison wasn't just reclaiming his daughter. He was turning her into the weapon that would destroy Gabriel's mission. You want me to convince Gabriel to stop investigating you. I want you to save the man you love from destroying everything he actually believes in. Before Isabel could respond, her phone buzzed with an encrypted message. Elizabeth, this is Agent Sarah Chun, FBI Counterintelligence. Everything Morrison is telling you is true. The network funds community programs, but it also funds human trafficking, drug distribution, and political assassinations. Gabriel knows this. We need your help to stop them without destroying the legitimate services they provide. Isabel stared at the message, her blood running cold. Agent Chun, the same name Gabriel had mentioned as his mother's alias. Mr. Morrison, she said carefully, may I ask you something? Of course. If your network is so beneficial, why does it require secrecy? Why not operate openly? Morrison's hesitation was barely perceptible, but Isabel caught it. Because federal bureaucrats like Gabriel's father are threatened by efficiency they can't control. Or because community services are a cover for less legitimate activities. Morrison's expression hardened slightly. Elizabeth, I'd hoped you'd be more pragmatic than your mother. What does that mean? It means your mother also struggled to understand that good outcomes sometimes require morally complex methods. Isabel felt a chill of recognition. Morrison was revealing his true nature now, someone who justified any means by pointing to selected positive outcomes. You use community centers to launder money. I use community centers to provide services that government incompetence can't deliver. And to move drugs. And to ensure that vulnerable communities have access to all the resources they need to survive. The euphemistic language was chilling in its implications. Morrison genuinely believed that drug distribution was a form of community service, that providing illegal substances was just another way of meeting consumer demand. Mr. Morrison, you're not just my biological father. You're a sociopath. Morrison's mask finally slipped completely. I'm a businessman who understands that idealism without pragmatism helps no one. And I'm someone who's learned the difference between helping people and exploiting them. Isabel stood, moving toward the conference room's door, but found it locked. Elizabeth, you're not leaving until you understand your true position. Which is, you're the heir to a network that spans 50 states and influences policy at the highest levels of government. You can either embrace that inheritance or watch it be destroyed by a man who claims to love you. Isabel's phone buzzed again. This time it was Gabriel. Isabel, I'm coming for you. Whatever he's told you, whatever he's shown you, remember that you choose who you become. She looked at Morrison, seeing her own features reflected in his face, understanding that she carried his DNA but not his moral framework. Mr. Morrison, I know exactly who I choose to become. And who is that? Someone who protects vulnerable people from predators who disguise exploitation as assistance. Morrison's smile was cold. Even if it means destroying the man you love? Especially if it means protecting him from compromising everything he believes in. Isabel pulled out her phone and began typing rapidly. Not to Gabriel, not to Agent Chun, but to Victoria. What are you doing? Choosing love over fear, truth over manipulation, and justice over family loyalty. The message she sent was simple. Victoria, tell Gabriel that Morrison's network uses community centers to traffic drugs and children. The funding is blood money. Don't let him compromise his investigation to save me. Some things are more important than personal happiness. Morrison lunged for her phone, but Isabel had already hit send. You little fool. Do you have any idea what you've just done? I've just proven that 25 years of being raised by good people matters more than sharing DNA with a monster. Morrison's face was twisted with rage now, all pretense of paternal concern abandoned. You think Gabriel Sinclair will choose duty over love? You think he'll sacrifice you for his precious investigation? I think Gabriel Sinclair will choose to become the man I fell in love with. Someone who protects innocent people even when it costs him everything. And what about you? What happens to Elizabeth Morrison when Gabriel chooses his mission over your life? Isabel smiled, feeling a strength she'd never known she possessed. Elizabeth Morrison dies, and Isabel Hartwell lives free from the shadow of other people's expectations. You're making the biggest mistake of your life. No, Mr. Morrison. I'm making the first real choice of my life. Outside the conference room, Isabel could hear helicopters approaching, the sound of Gabriel's rescue mission arriving. But she wasn't waiting to be rescued anymore. She was about to rescue herself. The helicopters descending on Morrison's compound weren't just Gabriel's rescue mission. Isabel watched through the conference room windows as military aircraft landed in perfect formation, disgorging not just tactical teams but a coordinated force that included FBI, DEA, and what looked like international law enforcement agencies. This wasn't a rescue. It was the culmination of something much larger. Impressive, Morrison said, watching the deployment with professional interest rather than panic. Gabriel's father doesn't do anything halfway. You don't seem worried. Should I be? Morrison's smile was knowing. Elizabeth, there's something about this situation you haven't grasped yet. Before Isabel could ask what he meant, the conference room door opened to admit someone she'd never seen before. A woman in her 50s with Gabriel's eyes and an air of absolute authority. Hello, Elizabeth. I'm Agent Sarah Chun. Isabel stared at the woman, confusion flooding through her. Gabriel said you were dead. Gabriel was told I was dead. There's a difference. Agent Chun moved into the room with the confidence of someone accustomed to controlling dangerous situations. Mr. Morrison, I believe it's time. Time for what? Isabel demanded. Morrison and Agent Chun exchanged a look that spoke of long partnership and shared understanding. Time to explain what's really been happening for the past 2 years, Agent Chun said gently. Elizabeth, everything you think you know about this situation is backwards. What do you mean? I mean Gabriel hasn't been investigating your father's criminal network. He's been investigating the federal agents who've been trying to destroy your father's humanitarian network. The words hit Isabel like a physical blow. She sank into a chair, trying to process this impossible reversal. That can't be true. Elizabeth, Morrison said, his voice carrying genuine paternal concern for the first time. For 2 years, Gabriel has been unknowingly working to expose corrupt federal agents who've been using his investigation as cover to eliminate community programs that compete with government services. Agent Chun pulled up files on the conference room screens. Look at the timeline, Elizabeth. Every time Gabriel identified someone in your father's network, federal resources that had been supporting community programs mysteriously disappeared. Isabel stared at the data, seeing pattern after pattern that suggested Gabriel's investigation had been systematically dismantling the very social safety net he thought he was protecting. But Gabriel said Morrison was trafficking drugs, laundering money. Gabriel was fed information designed to make him believe that, Agent Chun interrupted, by federal agents who wanted to eliminate a private network that was making government services look inefficient by comparison. You're saying Gabriel was manipulated? Gabriel was recruited by agents who told him his mother was dead and his target was a dangerous criminal. Agent Chen's voice was filled with pain. They used his grief and his idealism to turn him into a weapon against his own family. Isabel felt the world reshaping itself around her again. His own family? Morrison stepped forward, his expression gentle. Elizabeth, Gabriel Sinclair isn't just the president's son. He's also my stepson. What? Sarah and I were married for 3 years before she had to fake her death to protect Gabriel from people who wanted to use him against me. Morrison's voice carried 20 years of grief. Gabriel is your stepbrother. The revelation hit Isabel like a lightning strike. Everything about Gabriel's conflicted feelings, his knowledge of Morrison's operations, his ability to stay one step ahead. It all made sense if he was fighting against his own stepfather. That's why he was so torn about loving me, she whispered. That's why he was assigned to watch you in the first place, Agent Chen confirmed. Corrupt federal agents knew that Gabriel would be emotionally compromised by having to investigate his stepfather through his stepsister. They counted on that conflict to ensure he'd be thorough in gathering evidence. Isabel's phone buzzed with an urgent message from Gabriel. Isabel, I'm in the compound. My mother is alive, and she's been working with Morrison. Everything I thought I was fighting against has been backwards. I need to see you. He knows, she said. He's figuring it out, Agent Chen corrected. But Elizabeth, he doesn't know the most important part yet. Which is? Morrison and Agent Chen exchanged another look. Gabriel's investigation was never meant to destroy my network, Morrison said. It was meant to identify and eliminate the corrupt federal agents who've been using legitimate law enforcement resources to attack community services. President Carter has been working with you? President Carter has been working with us, Agent Chen corrected. Elizabeth, your stepfather recruited Gabriel for this mission specifically because he needed someone who could credibly investigate both sides, the legitimate community network and the corrupt federal agents trying to destroy it. Isabel felt understanding dawning like a cold sunrise. Gabriel doesn't know his father and stepfather are working together. Gabriel thinks he's been torn between duty to his father and love for his stepfather's daughter. Morrison's voice was gentle. He doesn't know that his real mission has been to choose love over false duty. That's a hell of a test. It's the only test that matters, Agent Chen said. Elizabeth, Gabriel has been unknowingly working to destroy the corrupt federal agents who killed his mother, or tried to. His investigation has identified every agent who's been using law enforcement resources for personal gain. The sound of footsteps in the hallway announced Gabriel's arrival. When he entered the conference room, his face was a mixture of relief at seeing Isabel safe and shock at seeing his mother alive. Mom. Hello, son. Gabriel moved toward Agent Chen like a man in a dream, touching her face to confirm she was real. They told me you were dead. They showed me your body. They showed you someone else's body. I've been deep undercover for 18 years, building a case against the agents who tried to kill me. Gabriel turned to Morrison, and Isabel could see years of confused emotion warring in his expression. James. Hello, Gabriel. You've grown into an extraordinary man. I've been trying to destroy everything you built. You've been saving everything I built by identifying the people who were actually destroying it. Morrison's voice was filled with pride. Gabriel, every corrupt agent you've exposed has been eliminated from law enforcement. Every piece of evidence you've gathered has been used to protect community programs from federal interference. Gabriel looked between his mother and stepfather, then at Isabel. You all knew? You've all been working together. We've all been working to protect the same things, Isabel said quietly. Community programs, vulnerable families, and you. Me. Agent Chen stepped forward. Gabriel, you were recruited for this mission not because you were expendable, but because you were the only person we trusted enough to do it right. You're the most ethical agent I've ever known. But I fell in love with Isabel. I compromised the mission. You fell in love with Isabel exactly as we hoped you would, Morrison said gently. Gabriel, your love for my daughter has been the driving force that made you fight harder than any professional obligation ever could. Gabriel sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the scope of revelations. So everything I thought was personal conflict was actually professional success? Everything you thought was betraying your duty was actually fulfilling your highest purpose, President Carter said, entering the conference room with perfect timing. Gabriel looked up at his father with exhausted confusion. Dad, did you know about all of this? I designed all of this. President Carter's voice was firm but loving. Gabriel, I needed an agent who could investigate corruption without being corrupted. Someone whose moral compass was too strong to be compromised by political pressure or personal gain. And you thought making me think I was choosing between family and duty would keep me honest. I thought letting you choose love over false duty would prove that you're the man I raised you to be. Isabel stood, moving to Gabriel's side. Gabriel, look at me. He met her eyes, and she could see the pain of 18 months of internal conflict finally beginning to heal. You've been fighting to protect people like me while thinking you were fighting against people like me, she said softly. You've been choosing love over duty while thinking you were being forced to choose duty over love. And what have you been choosing? I've been choosing to trust that the man I fell in love with was exactly who he appeared to be, someone who would sacrifice anything to protect innocent people. Gabriel reached for her hands, and for the first time in 18 months, there were no lies between them. Isabel, if I'd known that loving you was part of saving the world instead of betraying it, you would have been the same man. The man who chose to protect me even when he thought it would cost him everything. Isabel smiled through tears of relief and joy. Gabriel, you've been a hero this entire time. You just didn't know it. Morrison cleared his throat. Not to interrupt this reunion, but we do have one final piece of business. What's that? Gabriel asked. The corrupt federal agents you've been investigating are being arrested as we speak, but they're going to need someone to coordinate the transition of community services back to legitimate oversight. Gabriel and Isabel looked at each other, understanding dawning. You want us to run the community network, Isabel said. I want you to inherit what you've both been fighting to protect, Morrison replied. Elizabeth, you have the community connections and educational background. Gabriel, you have the federal knowledge and security clearance. Together, you can ensure that vulnerable families never again have to choose between government assistance and community support. President Carter nodded his approval. The federal government is prepared to partner with community organizations in ways we never have before. But we need people we trust to coordinate that partnership. Gabriel stood slowly, pulling Isabel up with him. Are you offering us a job or a calling? I'm offering you the chance to build the world you've both been dreaming of, Agent Chen said. A world where helping people doesn't require choosing between efficiency and ethics. Isabel looked at Gabriel, seeing in his eyes the same hope and determination she felt growing in her own heart. What do you think? Gabriel asked her. I think we've been preparing for this our entire lives without knowing it. Isabel's voice was strong with conviction. I think every choice we've made, every challenge we've faced, every moment of conflict we've survived has been leading us to this opportunity. Gabriel kissed her hand, and Isabel felt the last of her doubts dissolving. Then let's build something extraordinary together. As the federal agents outside finished documenting the largest corruption bust in American history, and as community centers across the country prepared to expand their services under new federal partnership, Gabriel and Isabel stood surrounded by their complicated, loving family. His father the president, their mother the secret agent, her father the reformed network coordinator, and understood that sometimes the most important battles are won not through destruction but through transformation. The investigation was complete. The network was reformed. The community centers were protected. And two people who'd thought they were choosing between love and duty discovered they'd been choosing love and duty all along. But the greatest victory wasn't professional. It was personal. Gabriel Sinclair and Isabel Morrison had found their way to each other through lies, deception, and impossible choices, proving that real love doesn't just survive truth. It's strengthened by it. The wedding was definitely going to need to be rescheduled. But this time, both families would be there to celebrate. 6 months later, Isabel stood in the same garden where her world had collapsed, but everything had changed, including her. The Riverside Garden wedding venue had been transformed into the National Community Partnership headquarters, and what had once been a site of betrayal and deception now buzzed with the productive energy of people building something meaningful together. Are you ready for this? Gabriel asked, adjusting his tie with hands that no longer shook with the weight of divided loyalties. Isabel smiled, feeling none of the anxiety that would have consumed her 6 months ago. I've been ready since the moment I realized that being afraid of who I might become was keeping me from becoming who I already was. Through the same windows where she'd once watched fake federal agents threaten innocent people, Isabel could now see representatives from 47 community centers arriving for the quarterly coordination meeting. Social workers, teachers, community organizers, and federal liaisons, all working together in ways that had seemed impossible before the network's reformation. 30 seconds, you two, Victoria called from the doorway, but her voice carried pride instead of the competitive edge that had once defined their relationship. Over the past 6 months, Victoria had become the network's communications director, using her business skills and her intimate knowledge of corruption tactics to help communities identify and resist exploitation. Her jealousy had been transformed into protective advocacy for vulnerable populations. Victoria, Isabel said, I never properly thanked you. For what? For being brave enough to admit your mistakes and fight to fix them. Isabel hugged her twin sister, feeling the genuine warmth that had replaced years of competitive tension. And for teaching me that family isn't about biology or perfection, it's about showing up when it matters most. Victoria's eyes glistened with tears. You taught me that loving someone means wanting their happiness more than your own success. Gabriel appeared beside them, no longer the conflicted agent torn between competing loyalties, but a man who'd found his true calling in the intersection of love and service. 5 minutes, President Carter announced, joining the group. Over the past 6 months, he'd become not just Gabriel's father, but Isabel's chosen family, someone who'd learned to balance presidential authority with grandfatherly affection. "How are you feeling about the expansion announcement?" he asked Isabel. "Nervous, excited, terrified." Isabel's honesty had become one of her greatest strengths as a leader. But mostly grateful that we're able to help more families access services without having to navigate corruption or choose between dignity and survival. The announcement they were about to make would expand the community partnership model to all 50 states, creating a network of locally controlled social services with federal support, but without federal bureaucracy. It was everything Gabriel had been fighting to protect and everything Morrison's original network had attempted to provide, but built on transparency rather than secrecy. "Isabel," Agent Sarah Chin appeared in the doorway, now serving openly as the network's security coordinator. Over the past 6 months, she'd become the mother figure Isabel had never had, someone who combined fierce protectiveness with unwavering support for Isabel's independence. "Mom wants to see you before the presentation," Gabriel said, still amazed that he could use that word again. "Both of you," Sarah corrected. "There's something James wants to share." They found Morrison in what had once been the venue's bridal suite, now converted into a private office where he coordinated with community leaders across the country. The transformation in him had been as dramatic as in anyone, from hidden criminal to open advocate, from manipulative predator to protective patriarch. "Elizabeth," Gabriel. He stood as they entered, and Isabel still felt a complex mix of emotions when she looked at him. Love, because he was genuinely trying to be the father she'd never had. Wariness, because she understood now that good intentions could still lead to harmful actions. "What did you want to tell us?" Isabel asked. Morrison pulled out a folder of documents. "The federal investigation into my old network is officially closed. Every corrupt agent has been prosecuted, every illegitimate operation has been shut down, and every community program has been transitioned to legitimate oversight. And," Gabriel sensed there was more, "and I've been offered a presidential pardon for my past activities." Morrison's expression was serious. "In exchange for my continued cooperation in identifying corruption networks in other countries." Isabel felt her stomach tighten. "You're going back to that life?" "I'm being asked to help other countries avoid the mistakes I made here." Morrison's voice was gentle but firm. "Elizabeth, there are networks like mine operating all over the world, some providing genuine services, some exploiting vulnerable populations, most doing both simultaneously. My experience could help international law enforcement separate the legitimate operations from the predatory ones." "How long would you be gone?" 2 years. Maybe 3. Gabriel stepped forward. "James, you don't have to do this. You've paid your debt to society. I haven't paid my debt to the people who suffered because of my choices." Morrison looked directly at Isabel. "Your mother died because I convinced myself that good outcomes justified questionable methods. I can't bring her back, but I can prevent other families from being destroyed by people who think like I used to think." Isabel studied her father's face, seeing genuine remorse and determination to make amends. "What happens to the community network while you're gone?" "It continues under your leadership. Both of you." Morrison smiled. "Elizabeth, you've proven that you inherited my strategic mind without my moral blindness. Gabriel, you've proven that you can fight corruption without becoming corrupted. Together, you can build something I never could have imagined." "What's that?" "A system that helps people without exploiting them. A network that provides services without demanding loyalty. A partnership between government and community that serves families instead of political interests." Before either could respond, Victoria appeared in the doorway. "It's time." They walked together toward the main presentation area, Gabriel and Isabel, Morrison and Sarah, President Carter and Victoria. A family bound not by blood or marriage, but by shared commitment to protecting vulnerable people and building sustainable communities. The crowd in the garden represented everything they'd fought to achieve. Federal liaisons working alongside community organizers. Social workers coordinating with business leaders. Families who'd been helped by the network standing beside the people who'd helped them. As Isabel stepped up to the podium where she'd once been humiliated and abandoned, she felt the weight of transformation. Not just her own, but everyone's. 6 months ago, I stood in this garden thinking my life was ending, she began, her voice carrying clearly across the audience. I'd been thrown out of my own wedding, learned that my identity was built on lies, and discovered that the man I loved had been keeping secrets that seemed to destroy the foundation of our relationship. She paused, looking at Gabriel, whose love and support had become the bedrock of her new life. Today, I stand here understanding that sometimes everything has to fall apart before you can build something better. Sometimes you have to lose who you thought you were to discover who you're meant to become. The audience was completely silent, drawn into her story. The Community Partnership Network we're announcing today isn't just about providing services to families who need them. It's about proving that cooperation is stronger than competition, that transparency is more effective than secrecy, and that love, real love, makes us braver, not more afraid. Isabel gestured toward Gabriel, who joined her at the podium. 6 months ago, Gabriel Sinclair thought he was choosing between duty to his country and love for me, she continued. Today, we know that protecting the people you love and serving the community you live in aren't opposite choices. They're the same choice. Gabriel took her hand, and when he spoke, his voice carried the confidence of someone who'd found his true calling. The expansion of the Community Partnership Network to all 50 states represents more than policy change, he said. It represents a fundamental shift in how we think about helping people. Instead of making families choose between government assistance and community support, we're creating systems where both work together. He looked out over the crowd, seeing faces of people whose lives had been improved by their work. But the real success of this network isn't measured in statistics or budget numbers. It's measured in families who don't have to sacrifice dignity for survival, children who have safe places to learn and grow, and communities that can thrive without having to choose between efficiency and ethics. Isabel stepped forward again. As Gabriel and I begin this expanded work together, we want you to know that our commitment isn't just professional, it's personal. We've learned that building a life worth living requires building a world worth living in. The applause was sustained and heartfelt, but Isabel wasn't finished. However, we also want to be honest about the costs. This work isn't easy, and it's never finished. There will always be people who try to exploit systems designed to help others. There will always be conflicts between efficiency and ethics, between individual needs and community resources. Gabriel nodded. But we've learned that those conflicts aren't problems to be solved. They're tensions to be managed by people who care more about doing right than being comfortable. As the formal presentation concluded and people began moving toward the reception area, Isabel found herself in conversation after conversation with families whose lives had been touched by the network's work. But it was her conversation with 8-year-old Maria Santos that stayed with her longest. "Ms. Isabel," Maria said shyly, tugging on her dress, "my mama says you helped make it so I can go to the learning center after school." "Your mama and the community center did that," Isabel corrected, kneeling to Maria's eye level. "I just helped remove some obstacles that were in the way. But you could have chosen to stay safe. Mama says bad people wanted to hurt you." The wisdom in her words struck Isabel with unexpected force. "Maria, can I tell you something?" She nodded eagerly. "Safety that comes from letting bad people hurt good people isn't really safety. It's just delayed danger. The only real safety comes from building a world where everyone is protected." Maria smiled with the radiant confidence of a child who felt truly secure. "Is that what you and Mr. Gabriel are going to do?" "That's what we're going to keep trying to do, every single day." As the sun began to set over the garden that had once symbolized everything wrong with her life, Isabel stood with Gabriel watching families head home to communities that were stronger and safer because ordinary people had refused to accept that exploitation was inevitable. "Any regrets?" Gabriel asked, slipping his arm around her waist. Isabel leaned against him, thinking about the question seriously. "I regret how long it took us to understand what we were really fighting for. I regret that people suffered while we were learning to see through deception. I regret that it took a crisis to bring our families together. But I don't regret any of the choices we made once we understood the truth." Isabel smiled, feeling the deep contentment that came from knowing her life had purpose beyond her own happiness. "And I don't regret loving someone who was brave enough to choose love and duty instead of choosing between them." Gabriel kissed her temple. "I love you, Isabel Morrison Sinclair. Not because you saved democracy, although that was pretty impressive, but because you taught me that real courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to do the right thing because you're afraid of what happens if you don't." As the last guests departed and the cleanup crew began their work, Isabel took one final walk through the garden that had shaped her transformation from victim to leader, from someone who sought approval to someone who gave support. In the spot where Morrison had held Victoria at gunpoint, there was now a memorial garden dedicated to families affected by corruption. In the area where fake federal agents had threatened innocent people, there were now planning tables where community organizers coordinated services across state lines. The transformation was complete, but Isabel understood that completion wasn't the same as conclusion. The community partnership would need constant work, constant vigilance, constant renewal of purpose. Democracy, she'd learned, wasn't a destination but a practice, something that had to be chosen fresh every day by people who believed it was worth the effort. Her phone buzzed with a text from Morrison. "Elizabeth, I'm proud of the woman you've become. The work you and Gabriel are doing gives me hope that the world will be better for the next generation." Isabel smiled as she typed back, "Dad, thank you for teaching me that making mistakes doesn't define you. How you work to fix them does." His response came immediately. "That's not my lesson. That's yours. You taught that to all of us." As Isabel turned off the lights in the garden for the final time as a wedding venue and the first time as a symbol of hope, she felt surrounded by the family she'd chosen and been chosen by. Not the perfect family she'd once fantasized about, but the real family that showed up when the work was hard and the stakes were high. Tomorrow, the real work would continue. Training organizers, coordinating services, supporting communities, and teaching young people like Maria that they had the power to build the world they wanted to live in. But tonight, Isabel Hartwell Morrison Sinclair stood in the doorway of her transformed past, hand in hand with the man who'd helped her discover her true future, surrounded by the family she'd thought she'd lost and the community she'd helped build, knowing that she was exactly where she belonged. The girl who'd once been thrown out of her own wedding, believing she had nothing left to lose, had become the woman who'd learned that losing everything false was the only way to find everything true. And in finding herself, she'd helped an entire country remember its founding promise. That government should serve people, that communities should support families, and that love, real love, makes us strong enough to build the world we want to live in. The wedding had finally happened, just not the way anyone had planned. The marriage of love and justice, of individual happiness and community welfare, of personal growth and social responsibility. And it was just the beginning. What did this story teach you about the courage required to choose love over fear, the power of truth to transform deception into purpose, and the possibility that our greatest challenges can become our most meaningful callings? Drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories that will change how you see the world.